Hello, this is Brad Tallis with Next Gen Solutions, and welcome to this week's Fusion Friday. This week's topic, I'm going to be talking about the loft command. I see this question come up quite a bit on why does my loft not work? So I'm going to show some tips and tricks that'll hopefully help you in the future. So let's dive right in. So one of the first tips I want to share is I see this question all the time where people create what I would call a hollow profile. So they're trying to loft from this profile to that profile, and Loft doesn't like these hollow profiles. In fact, if I were to do the loft between that profile and that profile, you'll notice that it makes it solid. So what should you do? Well, if it's even wall thickness, you could use the shell command afterwards. In this example, I purposely made it so it wasn't even wall thickness, so we can't use the shell command. But what I'll go ahead and do is I'll create the loft, like so. And then you can create another loft. So I'll go ahead and turn on my sketches, create a secondary loft, and I'll select this inside profile there and this profile here, and you'll notice the operation is cut. And when I say OK, sure enough, it will loft that inside shape and cut that away. So this is how you could go about creating hollow shapes. Another tip I like to use when I'm creating lofts is to create my profile as accurately as possible. And what I mean by that is, for example, in this shape here, I want to have filleted edges. So I'm actually going to do that in my sketch and not using the 3D fillet command. So let's go ahead and do, let's just do maybe a 1-inch fillet. I'm just going to go around and select all these edges. And you'll see why when we do the loft now. So I'll finish my sketch and create the loft. You'll see it's going to create a very nice smooth transition on this curve, and you notice you don't see any tangency lines or anything like that. So it's going from this curve here to this large curve there. If I undo all of those steps and we do the loft, and I add the fillet afterwards. So here you can see a tangential edge, but then I come in here and add a 1-inch fillet. You'll see how it's going to create those tangent edges, and it still kind of gives me the exact same result, but I kind of like the look of not seeing those tangent edges. So just another tip. The next tip I want to talk about is lofting between shapes that have a different number of sides. So if I were to create a loft between this rectangle and this circle, you'll notice, this has 4 edges or 4 sides, and Fusion kind of had to create 4 points on this circle, which has no sides, to be able to go from one corner to another corner, for example. Now, what not a lot of people know is you can actually move these points around. So, for example, you can kind of see what Fusion did is because this is kind of a rectangular shape, it did kind of a rectangular shape with the points. But I could bring these 2 points here up toward the top, for example, like so, and bring these down toward the bottom, and that's just going to change how the loft is created. So we can kind of see how this side has more of the curve and this front face is a little bit more flat with just a slight curve. But by moving these points around, you can change how that loft is created. So now you can see much more of a curve on this flatter face. So once again, you can move those points around. Now, here's the interesting tip. If I create a loft, I'm going from 4 basically to 1, and it's going to create the 4 for me. And then I'm going to, like 6, for example, and notice the result that we get. However, we can kind of see I'm getting some kind of weird profile shapes because it doesn't know where like this point is on this circle and on this rectangle. And so it kind of went down to the corner. Now I could grab this and move it up toward the middle, but I'm going to have to move quite a few of these points around to kind of get the shape that I want. Okay? So you can kind of see how that improved what that looks like. However, I kind of have this extra edge in here, and you'll notice I can't move that edge around. So how do I resolve this? Well, I usually start with the largest number of points, which happens to be this shape. And then I'm going to go to this shape here. And you can see what it did. It evenly kind of spaced those points on the circle. And we get, really nice looking loft. And then when I add in this rectangle as the last profile, you can see it tried to keep these points lined up. And we get a much nicer result than we did previously. Okay? So like the bottom points kind of line up with the bottom, etc. So just by changing the order of how you click on your loft profiles, you might get a different result. My tip here being start with the larger one if necessary and work your way that way. Okay, and then lastly, lofting is really powerful for odd shapes. For example, like this crane hook, I'm going to rotate isometrically. You can kind of see I started with a basic shape of the hook, okay, and then I came in and I added some profiles along this shape, and I'll show you how I did that. So you can see I have quite a few sketches that kind of define, this first one defines the overall shape of the hook. You can see I have lots of dimensions and stuff on here that kind of defines that. And then these other profiles, I just created, for example, a plane on 2 points. Started with a circle. Then, let me finish that sketch. Sorry. This next sketch, let me actually do it this way here. You can kind of see I created these sections, and if I turn on my origin, I basically just created a plane on this plane right here that I'm highlighting. And then the tip here is to use the project intersect. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to create an offset plane just somewhere, like let's just say along this curve like so. And then I'm going to create a sketch. Okay? And I'm going to rotate it isometrically so you can kind of see what's going on here. So my piece of paper, my sketch is basically cutting right through these two edges. And I want to create a particular shape that absolutely touches those edges. So I'm going to use the create project intersect command. And what this allows me to do is you'll notice when I hover over this line, you'll see that red dot appearing, and it's basically going to create a point where this line intersects with my sketch. So I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this curve. You can kind of see it's going to create that point. I'll say OK, and I now have 2 points that I could catch to. So for example, I could create a slot. So I could do, for example, an overall slot. I can go from that point there to that point there, and you can see how it's going to create that slot, and it's touching exactly where this side profile comes through that sketch. So that's how you can go about creating these profiles exactly where they need to be and making sure that they touch this profile. And you'll see why here in just a moment. So I basically have 2 different shapes. I kind of have this shape here, and then it's going to loft into more of a circular shape. So let's take a look at what happens when I create the loft command. So it's asking for the profiles, and you'll notice like this profile is being split in half. So I'm going to select both of those at the same time, and they both are profile 1. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. Now as soon as I click down here, it's going to try and loft from this circular shape down to that half shape there. So I'm going to click this other one, and you can see that it's going from a circular shape more toward this, rectangular shape. And I'm just going to continue along. So I'm going to just select these profiles, and then I'll do this guy here, and then I'll end with this one here. And I get a really weird result. And it's basically just trying to loft between these profiles. Now, obviously, I want it to kind of follow a particular shape. And that's what these rails are for. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus symbol here. And you can see we have two different kinds. We have rail or center line. And in this case, I'm going to do rail because it kind of defines the outside shape. So I'm going to select that. And now you can see that this loft is kind of following that outside rail as it's going through these different shapes. Now, you can see it's following the outside. I need to do the same thing for the inside, so I'm going to add another rail. I'll select that profile, and now it's following both of these lines as it's lofting around. And you can see what a nice result we get, and how it's going from like a circular shape to kind of this wide rectangular shape, and how that kind of looks like so. I'll go ahead and say okay. I could come in here, add a quick fillet. I'll just do maybe like a 11 millimeter radius, and we now have a nice looking hook, for example. And this would be very difficult to create without using the loft commands. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, all I ask is that you give the video a thumbs up and share or repost the video with others in your network. This will help spread the knowledge of Fusion out to the community. If you have any comments or ideas for future topics, please reach out to me at bradtallis@nextgensolutions.com, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Fusion Friday.